will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
And hello, K-Man, and welcome to another episode of Straight Talk here on Bobo 103.1 FM with your host, myself, Austin Harris.
And I'm Ellio Solomon. And yeah, welcome to your favorite talk show, Straight Talk. How are you today, Mr. Harris?
I am well today, Mr. Solomon, but I got to tell you, yesterday you pointed it out, and today we felt it again. I don't know if you stepped outside today, but as I found myself outside more so than usual, and let me tell you, summer is definitely here. It was surface of the sun hot today.
I know.
Oh, my God. I mean, theoretically, if I lose weight on water weight, then I should have lost at least a pound, maybe a pound and a half today just by, the excursions in and out and back to the car again.
And all I can say is I'm blessed I didn't have to do any construction today, Mr. Harris.
Well, yeah, I'm glad.
I was in office
for you today, buddy.
It was an admin day.
Well, that's good. Be grateful. Admin on overcast. Sorry, you can save your construction work for overcast days and even light rain days.
If only we could organize it that easy.
If only you could. I spoke to a guy in construction, not that I'm quote unquote cheating on you, Ellio, but we're just a conversation. I sprang up and he was saying, well, that's why when I build a house, I build a roof first so I can work in the shade.
Yeah.
And that made perfect sense to me.
Well,
of course, you can't get to the roof without the foundation, the footing, the walls. So,
well, again, it depends on what you're doing. I mean, if you're a guy that's building cabinets, well, you can work hard and get the shop, and then you can just stay inside and do cabinets work. But certain jobs, you just have to get outdoors. That's just the way it is. No. But I'll tell you the secret. The secret is get your butt up early.
Yeah, do it earlier in the morning.
Yeah, 4:30, 5 o'clock. As soon as there's enough light.
But see, the problem with that notion is, I mean, again, if you're developing in a large open expanse with no neighbors, then you can get away with that. But if you're developing in a small community, nobody wants to hear a chainsaw or a hammer or whatever at 4 a.m. in the morning.
The after 8 a.m. rule. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Well,
you have a different kind of problem.
In my case, I'm doing my own crap way down in the bushes.
Yeah.
I can get away with that.
Right. Indeed.
Get out there early. So my friend is saying, send me the password. Let me get this stuff sorted out.
Yeah, do me a favor. Speak to him for me while I go through the particular.
I don't know what it is. So you have to send it to him. Now everybody's sitting and saying, what are they talking about inside of there?
You do the talking.
So either way, I want to let everyone know there's a couple of things to talk about. And my colleague mentioned it yesterday that we're going to have a guest here up in the studio at around 5 o'clock, none other than the Mr. Huta, who's going to be chatting with us a little bit about soccer as we continue this discussion in terms of what is it going to take to get Cayman Islands a great national team, something that we can all be proud about. I definitely believe my colleague, I think, shares the exact same view that we definitely have proven that Cayman Islands has talent. It's only a matter of being able to invest the right amount of time, the right amount of money, and give them the opportunity on the national football team to shine as well. So we're going to have that discussion. I also want to just remind persons, I'm again promoting my friend Joey Ebanks, who is also doing the
based on the grassroots conversation, because I think that's the only way to tackle any real conversation, starting from the bottom, working our way up. What is the problem? What are we trying to solve? And what are some of the proposed solutions? And then talk to the people who are working in that realm and say, what do you think? So you can either take it or leave it, really, but it's a good suggestion.
Definitely getting out there and chatting with people is the only way you're going to really get a better idea. Remember, we used to talk about it in the sense that everyone in the room is basically like it's like having a blindfold on and everyone's touching the animal.
Right.
And it's only when we start describing what we're feeling that we can actually put a label to this animal that we have to deal with.
That's right.
I think it's going to be similar with this conversation. Now, I know you have to give some good news because I'll tell you what.
Welcome to Bobo. Welcome to Straight Talk on Bobo 103.1
Welcome to Straight Talk, Bobo.
Welcome to Straight Talk, Bobo. There you go. That sounds even better.
There you
Careful,
go.
you might hear that again. Welcome to Straight Talk, Bobo and TD. But welcome to Straight Talk here on Bobo 103.1 FM on your radio dial. And now proudly broadcasting or simulcasting live, rather, on YouTube and Facebook with the search word Straight Talk Radio Show. You can also find us streaming live on the ACT Cruise Tourism page on Facebook as well. So you can come to the Straight Talk Facebook page or you go to the ACT Facebook page. And certainly YouTube is open to everybody. That's where you can find us. Our link is now live and operating. So if that is where you catch the show, then hopefully you're seeing and hearing us as well. Yes, to my colleague's point, there is some good news to talk about. Yesterday, of course, we talked about the overspend, the difference between one administration to the next, talking about the fact that the HSA was in, quote unquote, the black a election cycle ago, and not going back to 2021. And then by 2021, the midway mark of the last 2023, excuse me. So 2021, the HSA were in the black, and by 2023, they were in the red, in the hole, in negative territory, highlighting over expenditure.
I think you mentioned figures of being in the black by 8 and then turning around and being in the red by 7.
Yeah, something to that effect.
Million.
Yes, no, absolutely, something to that effect. And again, I can find those details in particular. But we also touched on the Finance Committee that was held last Friday, and the approval of some $45 million in extraordinary, or what the term is, supplementary expenditure for 3 key ministers, one dealing with insurance, the other dealing with overseas medical care for indigents, and, of course, the third one dealing with financial assistance, largely the needs of NAU. And the point was that governments, not just the last PACT/UPM or the PPM or UDP that preceded them, all governments have traditionally underfunded and underdeclared, I might add, at budget time, the true value of what the annual expenditure will be in certain government departments, and these 3 are notorious for it. But they do so in order to obtain a balanced budget. And again, it's not your government trying to lie to you, but it's really about managing your income as you have it. You know that you can meet all of your obligations in these key areas for a period of the first 6 months. And whilst you hope through your own policies that number may diminish, you also have the, escape net that you can go back when the finance of the country improve, whether your revenues are up and general expenses are down. You can choose to go back 6 months later and say, I need extra money, or I don't need extra money. So it's just a way in which the government runs our economy and its financial management. It's just, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing illegal or untoward about it. But it is a budget that is presented once every 2 years that is always underfunded. So we're approving $2 million when we know, in fact, it's going to cost us $4 million to run the overall government, and this is what happens. So the government, in the good news category, saying all of that to say this is what we've been banging on the drum about, and this is another opportunity to congratulate the National Coalition for Caymanians, because also last Friday, the government acknowledged that there is, in fact, this overspend that is going on, what do they call it? Unrealistic budgeting and promises in the future. This is Minister of Finance, the Honorable Ralston Anglin, promising going forward at budget time that the government will seek to present realistic and honest allocations in future budgets that reflect actual service demands. So if he holds true to this statement, then the budget amount for tertiary care, for indigents, medical care overseas, whether it be the budgeted item for NAU and financial assistance, or what is budgeted for Cineco and the insurance for persons that either don't have insurance or those that have too little insurance.
Yeah.
That figure should be represented in terms of what is actually going to cost the country over that 2-year period, as opposed to the under-budgeted nature that has existed, as we say, from time immemorial. And I think that is a good step in the right direction, because not only does it tell the government and other MPs very clearly in document form, this is what our forecast is, and then if we spend more than that, then obviously it really jumps off the page, but also to the public, because it's their money. Again, you cannot understate this enough. The difference between government and private sector is government does not operate for profit. The monies in government are monies that are basically taxpayer monies. Government sells services, so your licensing fee, your driver's license, just think of the fees that you go to government for to access, even your health care, for example. If you're not a civil servant, somebody pays for health care. All of these are services the government sells and earns income from it. Tourism, again, the number of boots on the ground, we charge a tourism tax. That's government revenue. Licensing fees from financial services, that's government revenue. And we use that to basically determine how much we have to pay for the various services. And now for the first time, hopefully, if the government are sincere in this, is that they're going to present actual budgeted numbers. You're going to know from year to year what the real numbers reflect. And I think that's a step in the right direction, so worthy of commendation.
Well, just to give some clarity, paint a little bit with some color. The situation is that I think key to it is, what is it that you're presenting? If it is a case that you're dealing with operational expenditure, in other words, what does that specific department require in order to be able to do its day-to-day provision of services? If you're presenting that where you need 10 million, but you're saying 8 million in order to balance the budget, that's totally different than if you're saying we really need 10 million to do our operational stuff, but we did have a couple of things in place in terms of project, additional X, Y, and Z that required an additional 3 million.
Yes.
As in, like say capital expenditure. And if you reduce that, in other words, government says, listen, we need to balance the budget. You've got 3 million extra inside here, some projects.
Yes.
Can you shave some of that off? I think that's a totally different picture than if you're saying we're shaving stuff off of the operational expenditures just so we can balance the budget. It really kind of reeks a little bit of just not being honest.
Right. Well, it isn't. I mean, if we break it down in its smallest moving parts, then it is not honest financial management. But
right. It's like you just want to.
It's in the gray area. You know what I mean? It's in the gray area.
it's in the gray area.
Yeah, it's in the gray area. But you mentioned capital project. That's another example. So you may have a budget where you want to build, 10,000 roads. Let's just use that as a figure out of the air. But you really only built 5,000 roads. But you budgeted for 10,000. So now you say to your department, say, well, we have a 5,000 road surplus. We didn't do all of the projects. And I see a shortfall on the financial assistance side. So government will move some of that money around, and that's where the supplementary or the extra money comes from. So arguably, you're not necessarily robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're just moving money around, but doing it at different times.
And in some circumstances that occur, and the specific one that raised the issue was, I think it was NAU/Family Services or whatever. I don't know what the proper name is right now.
Yeah,
those social
assessment unit, the Department of Children and Family Services. I
believe it's the Department of Children and Family Services /NAU, but there was additional monies that were needed. And the thing of it is that they would have an idea to say that we now have 1,500 persons, for example, on the books that we need to be able to pay rent, etc. Some of the things were saying there were increases in rent, additional monies were needed.
Yes.
Then, of course, at the same time, that department would have, I would like to believe, be making some projections. Like, are we going to have a downturn in crews and end up with another 200 people coming and knocking at the doors? And some of these things become very difficult to assess, I would imagine. Hospital, same thing with respect to Department of Children and Family Services and NAU.
Yes.
But if you end up where, if you look at those to the best of my knowledge are not really anything project based per se. They're all operational. It's a matter of what I need to be able to provide specific services for the public.
Right.
So if
those are your recurrent costs category.
recurrent costs, right?
The costs that you're going to have to pay for, but it's not the first time you're paying for it. You should know what it's going to cost you from one year to the next.
Yeah. So if you got the realistic, as the National Coalition for Caymanians is saying, if you get the realistic budgeting, what people are going to see, if you actually get that, the real picture is going to be that we don't have a balanced budget, is that we have a deficit, that we're short here or there.
Mm-hmm.
And
or we're going to have to really roll back on some of these capital
and
projects.
I think that that's the effect of it.
Yeah,
I think
everybody's wish list will not be able to come true.
I think once you get with the realistic budgeting, well, then now everybody, including the general public, will say, hold on, the budget isn't balanced, so we are behind. So now that will give a little political strength, I believe, and justification to say we need to tighten the belt.
Yes.
The country isn't all rosy.
100% correct. Exactly. And it really does that, because a problem that we discovered in the last administration, and again, it's part of the confusion, it is what it is. You know, every MP who gets elected, obviously we know they have quote-unquote campaign promises that they want to fulfill. But not everybody can get all of their various projects approved in a single calendar year. And the scary reality is not even in 4 years can everyone get all of their wish list checked off. That's just the reality of it. But the average voter, and certainly that is the lifeblood for the MP, you know, you can't be minister unless you get elected to begin with. Mm-hmm. Then they're going to hold you to account and say, well, you promised this and you promised that. Now, if you present realistic budgeting that is, you know, clear and transparent, you say, here it is. This is how much the country got. Yeah. This is how much we can spend. We cannot afford, you know, 50 projects. We can afford 15, you know, and these are the ones that are, you know, ranked as the most pressing for right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that, to your point, will return strength to the political arm, because they can say, listen, I know I promised the moon, and yeah, but I'll give you the stars. You know, give me 2 years until I give you the moon. But they're realistic, you know, justifications for what we can expend and what we can't. And when we get in that mindset, then maybe we can have better understanding as to how politicians do their jobs, the challenges associated with them doing their jobs, but also the risks we take by, again, having our wants versus our needs given priority. That's how we run into trouble financially.
No, where the challenges are, and I have to refresh myself on this, but where the challenges come in now in terms of having a realistic budget is that you then don't meet all of the FFR requirements.
That's, again,
the framework for fiscal responsibility. So now the budget isn't balanced, and that now says the UK can do X, Y, and Z, which of course carries us back to a debate we had many, many moons ago when I said, do not do the FFR. That's a good idea.
Indeed.
But either way, that's going to be the other challenge, and I have to go and revisit it and see exactly what that's going to do. But definitely a realistic budget is just that. It's going to be realistic, and hopefully it will be something that it makes us all as a country say, hey, you know, we can't do this, we can't do that.
I'm glad you brought up the FFR, because the FFR is a living, breathing example of what happens when we do not follow the rules that we set for ourselves. And let me say that again. The FFR came around because the rules for our own financial management, we couldn't keep them. There is something called the Public Management and Finance Law, which underpins the budget process, you know, the expenditure. We can't spend more than 10% of revenues. You know, your borrowing capabilities are pretty much laid out in black and white in the Public Management and Finance Law. But like politicians, like government does, and again, government is fluid. Things change overnight. One hurricane can upset the apple cart significantly, and you may have to borrow more or less than your existing law allows. Or, like we talked about, you can fall prey to this, we have to have all of our wants as well as all of our needs, and we're going to spend it all in one foul swoop because we may have had a surplus 1 year to the other. That's where the pressure, where the discipline comes in, because if you maintain that viewpoint, then you fall afoul of your own, if you will say, guidelines. And that's where we were. Our expenditure had gotten to the point where we had entered a debt spiral. We weren't following our own rules. Then the UK stepped in and said, listen, Now you're going to have to, balance your budget, and we're going to have to approve it for you, because if we don't, then you're going to really price yourself or spend yourself into an even bigger hole. And because you're still a British overseas territory country, we own you still. We try to let you do your internal management, but really you're our responsibility. So we're going to help you help yourself. And that's where the FFR came from.
Well, that's a good thing about the politics. Is always good, even better when you rehash it. And the reality of it is that we had a lot of spending under one particular administration with respect to schools, etc.
Yes.
And we got ourselves into a deficit position. And by the time the new administration came in, I think it was $80 million deficit. And to your point, that is when in 2009, Chris Bryant, the secretary from the UK, wrote and said, implement property tax. We wanted to fight against it.
Yes.
And we were successful. Thank God for that.
Yes.
But in addition to that, they pushed us to implement the FFR.
Yes.
And I will stress, you had two leaders of the opposition and the premier at the time that was moving forward with the FFR, and we took it hook, line, and sinker. And to some extent, it's good. And the other extent, as far as I'm concerned, gave a little bit too much say on the UK. But we have
absolutely.
We still have a lot of people that love that idea.
We only have ourselves to blame because we spent more than we had. And again, that is why bringing it full circle, honest and realistic budgeting is important. It allows clear, open transparency in terms of the financial position of this country. And it also adds another layer or reminder that we have to work within our budget guidelines. We can only cut our cloth by the length of our garment and no more, because that fiscal discipline is where we want to stay. When we step outside of it, then we have these issues of the FFR and who got a better deal, and if his mother stepping in to wrap us on the knuckles. We don't want that as a developed country. And again, it's important to get there. It's an important first step by having honest dialogue and accounting for the financial position of the country. So we say that to just congratulate the government in our good news category for at least committing to take us down that road. It is, what time is it? 58 minutes past the hour of 4 o'clock. We do have to pause, check in with your top of the hour news brought to you by our news partner, the BBC. But when we come back, we begin part 2 in our series discussion on building a World Cup dream right here on Straight Talk.
Bobo.
The BBC's From Our Own Correspondent.
In today's Russia, no one is allowed anywhere near the political stage if they pose a serious challenge to Vladimir Putin.
Stories and reflections from our reporters around the world.
There is a major sense of insecurity here. More people are coming in from Sudan every day.
From Our Own Correspondent from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM.
How can we understand the world better?
The BBC World Service is a window onto the wider world.
The vantage point from which to survey a new horizon.
News, reports, and analysis from around the world.
Stories we think matter.
Different people from different societies.
We get to the heart of global issues.
News, stories, and global perspectives from the BBC World Service.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM. The BBC is the world's most trusted news source. And Bobo 103.1 is where you'll find the BBC World Service.
BBC News, the world news from the BBC.
And the home of Cayman's most listened to talk shows.
That's right, folks. Everyone is telling their mama about the cold hard truth.
And welcome to Straight Talk. I'm your host, Austin Harris.
And I'm Ellio Solomon.
Across Cayman, on FM, online, and on your smart speaker. This is Bobo 103.1. This is Bobo 103.1, powered by Health Services Authority. At Health Services Authority, they are committed to caring for you. They are Cayman's largest and longest-standing healthcare provider, offering the most comprehensive range of inpatient, outpatient, and public health services at 9 different locations across all 3 islands. Across Cayman on 103.1 FM, online, and on your smart speaker. The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo 103.1.
Hello, I'm Tom Dewsbury with the BBC World News. One of the most important figures in pop music, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, has died. He was 82. Born in California, Wilson co-founded the Beach Boys in 1961. They sold more than 100 million records, with hits including God Only Knows and Good Vibrations. Jason Fine is the editor of Rolling Stone magazine and hosted the documentary Long Promised Road about Brian Wilson's life.
He was a deeply compassionate songwriter in person. One of the things we always loved to do together, drive down to Malibu, look at the places really special to him growing up. You're sort of driving around LA with the guy who kind of created the mythology that we all dream about of LA, of the cars and the beach and the girls. He had mental illness and he had a lot of struggles in his life, but he was also really fun and funny.
The United States is preparing to move some staff and their families from its embassy in Iraq, as well as from military bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. Officials say the partial evacuation's down to what they described as heightened security risks in the region. Our State Department correspondent Tom Bateman reports from Washington.
The move comes after weeks of talks between the US and Iran. President Trump has hoped to strike a deal to stop Tehran developing a nuclear weapon, but he said today he was growing less confident it would stop enriching uranium. Earlier this week, he also held a 40-minute phone call said to be tense with Israel's Prime Minister, who has long argued for a military rather than diplomatic approach. Iran's defense minister said today the country would target US military bases in the region if a conflict was imposed upon it.
Israel says it's recovered the bodies of 2 more Israeli hostages from Gaza. One is that of Yair Yaakov. The other name has been withheld. The Israeli military said Mr. Yaakov was murdered by Islamic Jihad in Kibbutz Nir Oz during the October the 7th attacks. Sebastian Usher is in Jerusalem.
The Israeli army says the bodies were recovered from Khan Yunis in the south of Gaza on Wednesday. It says both of them were killed in the October the 7th attack and then taken to Gaza. Mr. Yaakov's partner and his 2 teenage sons were also abducted, but were released as part of a first ceasefire deal in November 2023. One of his sons, Yagil, has thanked Israel's security forces for recovering his father's body and expressed his hope that the remaining hostages would be returned through a deal that would, in his words, not endanger soldiers.
The disgraced Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein has been found guilty on 1 charge of sexual assault at his retrial in New York. He was found not guilty of a 2nd sexual assault charge. The jury's not yet reached a verdict on a 3rd rape count. The ruling comes after jurors remained deadlocked in 5 days of deliberation, with some reportedly launching verbal attacks against each other. World news from the BBC. An uneasy calm has descended over Los Angeles as the US Marines prepare to deploy to the city after nearly a week of protests and riots over the Trump administration's immigration raids. The first night of a partial curfew was lifted on Wednesday morning. The police said they'd made hundreds of arrests overnight. The authorities are bracing for more demonstrations in LA and other US cities. One of the most respected antique experts in France has been jailed for helping to pass off fake antique chairs as genuine. One pair, which he claimed were made for Marie Antoinette, was sold for $2 million. Here's our Europe regional editor, Paul Moss.
It apparently started as a joke. The antiques expert Georges Palot and woodcarver Bruno Desnus say they wanted to see if they could fool people by making furniture and artificially aging the wood to make it appear to be the work of master craftsmen from 2 or 3 centuries ago. Galleries and antique dealers were indeed fooled, even curators from the Palace of Versailles. But now Palot, Desnus and 4 others have been convicted for their role in the forgery. In court, Mr. Desnus said he was motivated only by the pleasure of making beautiful things.
The Women's Tennis Association says it'll protect the rankings of players who wish to freeze their eggs or embryos so they can start a family at a later date. The offer's open to top athletes who spend more than 10 weeks out of competition due to the procedure. Leading female tennis stars have welcomed the announcement. And scientists have identified a new species of dinosaur from an 86-million-year-old fossil belonging to a museum in Mongolia. They say it's the closest known ancestor to tyrannosaurs, including the fearsome T-Rex. The fossilized skeleton shows the early evolutionary stages of features that were key to tyrannosaurs' domination as apex predators, including long hind limbs and powerful jaws. It's been named Canculu mongoliensis. BBC News.
Opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
And welcome back, K-Man, to more Straight Talk here on Bobo 103.1 FM and simulcasting live over YouTube and Facebook, both at our own page, Straight Talk Radio Show, and, of course, the ACT Cruise Tourism page. Welcome back to the program with your host, Ellio Solomon, myself, Austin Harris. And certainly we want to welcome our guest. We now move into our substantive conversation. Our guest in studios will be with us all the way until 6:30 as we continue part 2 in our series discussion on what is it going to take to build a world-class national team program in the Cayman Islands that can be consistent. We're not saying, you go and win every major cup, but surely we must be able to say to ourselves, if not desire of ourselves, to do better than where we are, and that is our goal in these discussions. Our guest today is a foundational leader, motivator, and mentor. He has been a tireless ambassador for the sport of football through decades of coaching and mentoring both youth and senior football teams, largely in the District of West Bay, but across the Cayman Islands, also throughout the spans of his career. His local team, Future Football Club, has over the years steered countless young people in West Bay towards fulfilling their potential, with many of his former players taking their skills with our guests' mentoring, taking their skills abroad to compete in places like Baylor College and King's College in Tennessee, and even to the very top Portuguese club, Sporting Lisbon, the club that gave people like Cristiano Ronaldo and Nani and Luis Figo their starts. Some of our own Caymanians had the opportunity to train in these clubs as a result of the mentoring that our guest provided. Our guest in studios is certainly someone who needs no introduction, but we'll get one anyway. It is our pleasure to welcome Coach Roy Huta Ebanks as our guest in studios this evening. Coach Roy Huta, if I may start to call you that, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Austin, for having me here. And thank you, Cayman Islands, for your support and your acknowledgement of people like myself that continue and has contributed tremendously to the upliftment of the Cayman Islands through the sport of football, mostly.
Absolutely. Well, again, it is a pleasure to have you as our guest in studios, and we think, it's a big deal because obviously we're on a very serious topic, and we want honest opinions to talk to us about, what's broken, but at the same time, how can we fix it, is being the key there. But I also just want to throw in, just as an aside before we begin, because obviously you can see a bit of a familial relationship, if you will. I've had the pleasure of knowing Coach Huta for a very, very long time. And whilst I've never played on any of his squads, I've had friends who did, and they were very close to me as well. And as such, I have a lot of love for our guest in studios. But I have even more love because we are also both lifelong Brazil football fans at the World Cup level. And I just want to point out that, and I'll get Coachy to agree or disagree with me, we see yet again, because we're reminded the World Cup is next year, and we get confirmation this week or today that Brazil once again qualified to be in the 2026 World Cup. And why is that important? Well, here it is for all the Messi fans and the Germany fans and everybody else. Just saying, Brazil is the only team in the world in history to be in every World Cup since the first World Cup. Am I right or am I right?
You're correct.
All right, fair enough. So we just a little moment to gloat, a little moment to cheer for we team, right? Beautiful, beautiful.
And to crown that for you, Austin, I was very fortunate to see Anderson Nascimento, the man them called Pele, played twice in my life.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yes.
You saw him at the 1994, didn't you?
No, the Pele was retired.
Not Pele, not Pele.
First game that I saw Pele play was against a team called the Miami Toros. Was a professional team in Miami.
Okay.
And he was on a world tour, farewell tour with Santos.
Nice.
Of Brazil. And that was the last game.
Nice.
And me and two other my friends out of West Bay, we decided to go. And
Indeed.
I was able to see him play for Santos.
Right.
And
94 was though when Brazil won the World Cup, and you were there as well.
70, yes, I was in Los Angeles.
Nice.
Yeah,
At the Coliseum.
I was at that game to Renard Moxham and our former president, Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
He was
the Three Musketeers were there for that matchup.
Right. And the next time I saw Pele played was when he played his first game for New York Cosmos at a place called Downing Stadium in Randall's Island, New York.
Wow.
That was 1975. I was there.
All right. Well, if anybody needed a football resume in terms of how long Coach Huta has been a lover of the game, both as a fan and then as a coach and then as a technical director and, even as an administrator at certain levels, listen, this man has spent a life.
A father, we covered all the bases.
You covered every single one of the bases. So you are, again, in the category of an expert guest on the subject of football. And again, we thank you for being in studios with us.
I am honored for that sentiment.
If I can just sort of, I guess, set the table, if you will, and show some continuity. Friday, we had the pleasure of hosting Coach Ernie Gilly-Seymour to this discussion. He was, our part one is how we started off this conversation. And it was such an informative, insightful, and I dare say even inspirational conversation. I can't say enough about it. But he helped in his hour and a half pull out really what we thought were three distinctive key points about, getting us closer towards developing a national team, a world-class national team. And he suggested that whilst this note, because it's been hanging around for a while, saying one of our Achilles' heels is that, when Cayman takes on other teams, whether regionally or nationally, the significant difference is those athletes who are competing at those teams are doing it almost at the professional level where they're getting paid, whereas our players, our amateur players, they still work a 9 to 5 and then go out to train. So arguably their discipline is perhaps even more so, but the time on the pitch, the time in the classroom is reduced by at least 8 hours a day when they're at work, and therefore that's something that's wrong with us. He pointed out that that's incorrect. There are still successful amateur clubs or amateur players that work and compete at the national level and compete well. But it's just a matter of training, not only the players, but ensuring your technical directors have the academic classroom knowledge that they can then transfer to the players on the field and produce results. So I guess he demystified the notion that paying a player is an Achilles heel. It more so is an excuse. But we did do the math. And we said to ourselves that even if we were to pay our players, what kind of numbers are we talking about? And certainly Ellio, my accountant and mathematician in studio, said, listen, if we spent $5 million on 22 players, 2 teams, not just 11, but a full 22-member squad, we can spend $5 million per player, earning $60,000 a year in salary per player for 4 years and spend only $5 million. And we asked the question, what do we spend $5 million on this country on a number of issues that arguably aren't as important or sincerely as impactful and meaningful than perhaps a national football program? So we've answered the fact that they don't have to be paid, but if we did pay them, it wouldn't break the bank. So that was the first thing. The second thing is that what is a bigger Achilles heel to national sports development in Cayman is the absence of leadership. And by that we mean the coach or technical director in Cayman at the national team level.
Can I interject?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Can we answer the first one first?
That's even better. Let's do that way. Yes, so that I don't get too verbose.
Right.
Let's talk about that one. Do you agree or disagree?
Always, there is two kind of motivation that we all have. There's one called extrinsic and one called intrinsic. And I me personally feel that the players in Cayman sure need to be, could be materialistically or economically rewarded for the better term, right? But it goes deeper than that. What is the pathway for becoming a professional? Because you have to be a professional now. This you talk about coming from an amateur level and transferring into a professional level because you're getting paid, you're going to sign a contract. But what are the pathway to you reaching that level? And is there a consistent pathway program there that is continue fueling this endeavor, so to speak?
Absolutely.
And I think that, to me, where the problem in Cayman football is that we are not united with our thoughts and our experiences and things. I asked for SIFA and our president, Mr. Alfredo Whitaker, why he do not hold a symposium on top the game and get all the stakeholders, the coaches, the presidents of the clubs, people from the private sector, and put together a national development program that has a pathway geared to what we are talking about, towards players becoming professional, and only that they're becoming and using that pathway to take players and put them into a higher level overseas. Or, that's, to me, that's what I see first. Plus, in the look at the program that René Simone's done in Jamaica when he took over Jamaica program, which was, even though the Premier League and players were getting some stipends, some money, but it was still a very, very low level of economical sustenance for the players. And he got each company in Jamaica to adopt a player and to finance a player for the program.
Well, there you go.
So I have a quick question, Mr. Huda. I mean, the specifics that my colleague would have raised, one of those being that at least one person, Coach Giller, believes that it's not an issue in terms of persons having to work the sort of typical 9 to 5. Would love to get your comments on that specifically. Do you take somewhat of a different view, or do you agree with that view?
Well, like I said, I was looking at a scenario here, and if you're working for a company in Cayman, right, and use a player, why that company do not, and that company have the means, why that company don't adopt you as a player and even make you work half a day, and their contribution will be that they'll contribute another half of your day for wage. They're still paying you,
of course,
but you only work half a day.
So, but going based on what you're saying, and I understand that you're offering up a solution. I like that. I like that idea.
Yeah,
but
that reduces the cost to the taxpayer, I might add.
But from that perspective, then it would seem to be saying that we would infer, we believe that what you're actually saying then is the players could use more time, and that the 9 to 5 is impacting their opportunities.
Oh, tremendously, because you got to look. This is a human being. He has emotions, he has and going to work all day. You never know what kind of environment this individual works in. It's not just a matter of the physical labor or the physical exhaustion, but maybe he's doing
a mental stress
which to me is much, much more important.
And it's going to impact how you come out and train and stuff.
But
afterwards.
Again, we have so much other obstacles against us of improving in our whole, not just in football, but in our whole team sports in general. You understand? We just had a swimmer called Mr. Jordan Cooks.
Yes, sir.
Little boy. He put Cayman on the map probably more than in the recent years than anybody else, so to speak. Where is he right now? Is he being used? He should be used as our global tourism ambassador. And that's the kind of reward this child should be getting.
Agreed, 100%.
And he also should be utilized to come around the schools, all the things to inspire, to motivate. These are the areas. Because we are a very institutional, weak people when you come into these kind of things, when you come into supporting sports at advancing to a professional level. Our university, right now in the Cayman Islands, it's UCCI, our government university. They do, I may stand corrected from the public and from both of you, but I don't think they even offer a scholarship program in physical education over there.
So it sounds like what you're saying, amongst other things, because you talk about utilizing Jordan Crooks and tourism and kind of making him a bit of a hero. You're saying that you think our people generally don't have we're not building our own heroes and motivating our youth.
You are very correct. Well, look at us. Look at me, like me and Coach Gill and them. They phased us out from working in the communities.
Right.
Man, they have given a life, and we are still fit. We are still cognitively well, mentally, everything stable. And you take this kind of wisdom and things that have been proven, and you take it away from the younger people? No.
Well, I'll have to find the exact quote, but there is a quote that, pretty much aligns with what you're saying, and that is that if you can't make your own local heroes, you'll have to find one from somewhere else. And the problem with that is if you are looking somewhere else, well, the person who's here growing up is always going to perhaps feel like I can't achieve it because who I see achieving is from another country, from somewhere else.
I just want to go back to that because it really is a key insight. And again, it transcends itself outside of the game of football. And I think, to paraphrase, whether we pay our players or don't pay our players, whether there are ways in which to share those costs with private sector and government, that is a small point compared to the bigger picture that we seem to be missing that could have a football element, but we use the example of swimming. Why don't we use our top-tier athletes and the accomplishments, as we acknowledge, they put us on the map. If he didn't jump in that pool, if he didn't perform as well as he had, he wouldn't be in the world rankings. So he is already acknowledged as a top-tier athlete in the Cayman Islands. Why not reward him further by creating a national hero, national sporting icon, but also use that world ranking to promote sports tourism? So maybe instead of throwing your tourism marketing dollars, say, I don't know, in European visitors who really would rather come to Spain because it's more affordable, you can take that marketing dollars and give it to Jordan Crooks and put his face behind our tourism dollars. Yes?
Correct.
There you go. So it's win-win. Now we have achieved a greater than ourselves solution by uplifting our players, uplifting the sport, and to your point, that could also, in the future, apply to some of our top football stars. I thank you for making it.
Well, let's go to the present. We just have a little player out of the West we call Gunnar. He was just signed by a MLS club.
Gunnar Studenhoff.
That is right.
Yes.
I produce a player here called Leighton Thomas. He was the first player, and when under Jeff administration, he held on the CONCACAF on the 15th first tournament here. And this little fellow was the top scorer. And he went to England on academy. And he went there and played he reached so high that he played 5 levels below the Premier League. And he won the Golden Boot. He scored 31 goals in 33 games. I got all the pictures with the Golden Boot. Why these little players for football, you see not speak about Jordan Crook, why these players is not the face of Cayman football? Why they are not presented? Now, we got a little boy here called Jonah E. Banks. He been the top scorer in the Premier League for the last 3-4 seasons. He was top. He don't even play for the national team. The last game, Gunnar was not there. Leighton Thomas was not there. And why is that? And why these people is not promoted more? Why these footballers is not promoted more also?
Well, you make a good question in terms of, I think, if I heard him correctly, you're questioning, in first case, the selection process that goes into players that make the national team, yes?
Yeah, that have been a tremendously controversial issue.
But we like controversy if it's the truth.
Over the years, in terms of national selection.
Yeah. So what I'm really getting from Hutu, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is that he's saying, even if you look at it right now, we already have a tremendous amount of talent. So on the swimming side, Jordan Crooks, but again, other persons in the football. But it seems, and again, it kind of goes back, unfortunately, to when we hear that the crab mentality. We lack the ability to promote our own.
Yes.
And we fail to realize that when I'm promoting that guy, when I promote Austin Harris, someone is going to be intrinsically motivated by the fact that you have been promoted.
Absolutely.
And that goes even further than the dollar.
Because then that is that pathway to greatness that you spoke of at the very beginning.
Thank you, my boy.
That is how you create it. some youngster seeing Jordan Crooks' face on television on the national stage may very well encourage that youngster to pursue a swimming career. Likewise, Gunnar Studenhoff, making Cayman proud, let's plaster his face out
all over the place
to grow the next future national team of the Cayman Islands.
I'll give you an example of that.
Brilliant,
because
Coach.
When I was in Parliament, this was one of the things I said. I said, you got all these names out there, for example, in Hero Square, but nobody knows them. Nobody knows what they did. You need to get their story out there. You know, the kids should be able to go in the library and see a photograph on the wall and hear all the wonderful things about this person. That is how we inspire our people, you know? And I don't know why we don't do it. It like I said, you know, I don't know if we want to just capture it off on this crowd mentality, but we must make our own heroes.
I was listening to the opposition leader, Mr. Joey Hugh, which was, I coached him one time in his early development of football. And I heard him make that statement pertaining on to what you said, that why it is that we wait till they achieve this greatness and then we have these big receptions and we have all of these things for these achievements associated with the person. But after that is over, what continuation that you have to find another gem like this or maybe two more like this to continue to develop.
That's right.
Understand?
That's right indeed. And again, from there, certainly you create that machinery that breeds, perhaps you will, the next generation of Caymanian, whether it be swimmer, whether it be football star, whatever sport that we are competing with, that is where, I guess, the breeding grounds begin, because we see a youngster looking up to another Caymanian, to Ellio's point, some hero that they can recognize being from the same place they are, achieving world-class greatness, and asking themselves, well, if he can do it, why can't I do it? And that, of course, feeds that dream from a very young age and may lead to that future world stage with a little help along the way.
Thank you, my boy.
All right. It is 28 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock, and we do have to take our first very short commercial break. But again, in part two, we're learning that the steps to taking us to, you know, developing a world-class national football team is a bit rather, you know, involved and complex in some cases. But clearly, if we put those very small but important pieces together, the benefits they will yield for us, not just in the game of football, but sports in general, and arguably even at the Cayman identity level, they will pay great dividends in the future. We're going to pause, take a short commercial break, but there'll be more Straight Talk next on Bobo FM.
More Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio coming up. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Bobo 103.1.
Celebrate World Sea Turtle Day with us. Join the Cayman Turtle Center for this annual Head Started Turtle Release. Come on out on Monday, June 16th at 10 a.m. at Governor's Beach. It's free, it's fun, and it's for the planet. Be there to witness conservation in action. Monday, June 16th at 10 a.m. at Governor's Beach. It's the Cayman Turtle Center annual Head Started Turtle Release. We'll see you there.
Be prepared. Construction costs have gone up, so you may be underinsured. Call your insurance company for a checkup to make sure you have enough coverage for your home and belongings. Be informed. Make a plan. Be prepared. For more information, visit caymanprepared.ky.
At Price Right, spending less on everyday products is easy.
Spend less on office supplies, tools, and automotive products.
Spend less on groceries, fresh produce, and meat.
Spend less on electronics, TVs, and speakers.
Spend less on home furnishings, beauty products, and apparel.
At Price Right, we believe you can live better for less.
To start saving, visit us at the Airport Center in Georgetown or at Republic's Plaza in West Bay.
For more info, visit priceright.ky. Live better for less at Priced Right.
Visit Healthcare Pharmacy's second location in Governor Square, servicing West Bay and the 7 Mile Beach Corridor with the care and professionalism you have come to expect from Healthcare Pharmacy. Healthcare Pharmacy in Governor Square also stocks a huge selection of Hallmark and shoebox greeting cards, vitamins, sunblock, last minute, and everyday needs. To refill and transfer your prescriptions, simply WhatsApp 329-7313 or visit healthcarepharmacy.ky or drop by Monday to Saturday from 9 till 6.
We need to talk. Okay. We've noticed you've been going to KFC a lot more than usual lately. And
that's fine. We know you love it.
we just don't understand how you could afford it.
The KFC What a Deal menu starting at just $3. Gives you lots of great choices and value. Available at KFC Baytown Plaza, Shedden Road, and in the Strand. The KFC What a Deal value meals. The deal everyone should know about. Come to KFC and enjoy a variety of tasty choices at surprising prices. KFC, so good.
Hello, pet parents. We're K-Man Vets, K-Man's most advanced veterinary clinic providing quality care and services. We are committed to being your pet's advocate and friend, offering a lifetime of care. From vaccinations and wellness checks to more advanced surgical procedures, complicated medical concerns, and emergency care on demand. For more information about us or to get in touch, please visit kmanvets.com. K-Man Vets, where compassion meets excellence.
Across Cayman on FM, online, and on your smart speaker. This is Bobo 103.1, powered by Health Services Authority, committed to caring for you. The views and opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
And welcome back, man, to more Straight Talk here on Bobo 103.1 FM and simulcasting live over YouTube and Instagram with your host, Ellio Solomon, myself, Austin Harris. The phone lines are open at 745-2626, or you can reach out to us on our WhatsApp number, 928-2562. And from there, you can either share us a WhatsApp audio note or a traditional WhatsApp text message. Our guest in studios, oh my goodness, if you missed the first half hour, where you been? Because my God, are we learning something here and being inspired in the process. Our guest in studios, Coach Roy Huta Ebanks, leading us through our second part in our series discussion, what does it take to develop a world-class national team program? During the first half hour, we talked about the fact that, Huta agrees that paying a player is not the biggest problem, but certainly also highlighted ways in which they could be paid, and not all of it has to come from the public sector. But more importantly, in his view, what we need to do is, where are the pathways that will develop the national team players of the future? What pathways and opportunities are we putting in place to build that national team, that world-class national team in the future? And he gave, again, a fantastic explanation for that. But before we move away from the pathways conversation, I know my colleague wanted to share something.
Yeah, I think we walk away with several different things, and one that I find very inspirational now is the intangible thing that he talks about, because oftentimes we talk about that extrinsic motivation, but he's focused us a little bit on this intrinsic motivation, and that comes from creating our own heroes, getting our own stories out. And as we were chatting during the break, I was getting a little bit of your story and being inspired as well. So succinctly share a little bit of your story. How did Huta get to where he is today? You started telling me, give that to us on air.
Well, first, I would like to make tribute to all of the past and present contributors to this beautiful game called football that have become, I would say, major part of my life. I would say most of it of my life. I had many early mentors and You know, the man like Mr. Artie Banks, which was one of the early pioneers coming out of Jamaica, University of Jamaica, to bring cricket and football to Cayman. And I think one of the main architects, which he was my principal, was a man called Teacher Timothy Markfield. You know, he was very instrumental in getting the game organized and started here. And I came up under football, being influenced by football and cricket, because there was only 2 football teams in Cayman at that time. It was Georgetown and was West Bay. And Georgetown team used to play with the glass house season, they call it Partner Ground. And the West Bay team used to play with the West Bay Primary School is now. Man like Mr. Carl Godet and all them used to play for Georgetown. And my brother, one of my main mentors, 2 of my main mentors was a man called Mr. Ed Bush, which the field is named after.
In West Bay?
The first man that gave us opportunity. He carried us to Jamaica, all the way, things like in the early 70s. And Mr. Ivan Finton, which is still around.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a great, I would say you cannot find words to describe him. I saw him playing football up until he was 84 years of age for the West Bay Legends team. So these early pioneers was very influential in being integrated and loving the game of football, you know?
Yes.
And I was more, my friends had more freedom than me during the 50s and going into the early 60s, because I had to do a lot of chores and things for my mother and things, because my father died when I was at a very young age. And what happened was that when my friends go play football, I was the one that had to be doing all that, and I see them going, you know?
Right.
Eventually, as I go older, as boys grow, I became more independent, because your age made you much more independent, and I started to work on my own, and then my friends, the close friends, started to get me more involved in the game, and then we did. And what happened was that I was always an observer of the game, always want to observe and share information and things. And I used to sit on the bench all the time, and I went one whole season, I didn't play a game, because I think Eddie was a man that when I voiced my opinion, he didn't really like it too much, so he kept me on the bench for one whole season. But look how God blessed me. The next season, Eddie went back to sea, because when they came home from sea, they was involved with the game, and he went back to sea. So the club had a vote, and who would be the next captain, because the captain those days became the coach and everything, and it was me that they voted, even though I did not play a game, but through my observations and sharing information and things that I was doing, they voted me the captain. And that team was called the Lions. And that was the first team that brought a trophy to West Bay. You know? So that is how my whole, in my first initiation to the game all came about. And then I coached a team out of Boston Bay, a youth team, and my team, a youth team out of Boston Bay called Mike Alpine Cavaliers, that were Pastor Gary Haylock and all, and quite a few of those boys, they're still around. I coached a team out of there. And I just kept growing in the game and growing until, you know, fast forward, I was fortunate enough to leave Cayman in the 80s, and I went to live in New Jersey. And there I got integrated back into the game, because I used to work for an academy over there called Rovers Soccer Academy. And I was able to also go back to school in New Jersey. I got my GED, and then one of the kids that I was coaching, his father sponsored me in college. And I was there, and I came with in physical education. And I'm proud to say that I came up with a 3.3 GPA, and on the dean's list in the year 2000 in my last semester.
Congrats.
And I took that information, and I could have stayed in New Jersey, because I was offered to go on to more school, because I used to work in the academy, and there was a coach there that used to coach a top woman program, college program, and he wanted to recruit me and to go over there to coach him. But I was always coming back and forth to Cayman. I never gave up my roots here. Every break I got, I was back in the Cayman Islands. And when I came back, I saw all the rapid changes that was going on in my community, especially with the young males. Gangsterism was started to emerge at the high school, which they would call them then groups of men, but they were gangs forming from then. And these little boys love football. And I got involved with them from West Bay Primary because I used to volunteer my services there. And I say, I going back to Cayman. I can use my knowledge that I got up here, and I going back to support and contribute to the development of my people.
Yeah.
And I'm not ashamed to say that because I took a team, Future started the West Bay Primary School team from 1998 West Bay Primary School team. And I took them over and was called Mr. Floyd Bush, Mr. Arnold Haney, and Border Bush was the people that helped them kept organized, and they won the primary school championship. But they didn't want to break up; they wanted to stay together. That's Dion Brandon and them, and scholars want to take them under their club system, but they know they was independent. They was really wanted to form their own team. So when I came back, they asked me, Mr. Floyd asked me if I want to take the program over. Mm-hmm. But I told him I was not going to take the program over until they get an administration. Right. Because it was just a loosely thing, you know. Mm-hmm. So they got a president, a vice president, a treasurer, a secretary. Because where I'm coming from now, I'm coming from organization. I don't just come from teams slapping up together, you know. So they got that, and Mr. Dana Owens was our first president. Mr. Philip E. Banks, that you see just run. Yes. He was also one in Red Bay. Dina Thompson was our president. And the one that I would say was done it more than anybody else I contributed to myself and also to the club was a woman called Sarah Orrit, which I guess everybody know, the one called Cece.
Yeah.
I mean, she's no stranger here. No, man.
Absolutely.
And I mean, her contribution here. And so I took boys, and I'll just give you a joke.
Coach, sorry to interrupt you. Again, I need you to get a little closer to the microphone.
Yeah, and I will show you the cultural and social changes. And what I did was I gave Mr. Arnold Haney them a plan that I want to take these little boys overseas and put them into college camps for the summer. So we got a relationship with UCF in Orlando. And we used to take these little boys, 11 and 12 years old, but it's a residential camp. So they had to go and live on campus. Right. Instead of being chaperoning them. So they had to wake them each other up in the morning. So this is why I introduce it now, because these kids need this kind of stuff for their development. Absolutely. And I'm proud to say that all of them have come out successful, so to speak, from that first generation of players. Nobody can share. So the first day we went 2 days before, so they could go shopping, or they were like stallion, because some of the first trip away in Walmart, the whole 9 yards. Mm-hmm. So I took them to a Chinese buffet, right? And someone didn't know how to eat on a buffet, my boy.
Now tell me something, because we're gonna show our age. When you say Chinese buffet, that wouldn't be like a Benihana or any of those type of establishments. No. All right.
It was in the yellow. So.
Those Benihana chefs were something.
This was the examples of the level of kids that we had at that time. You know, at the level of kids that we had at that time. Yeah. And I'm proud to say that out of that whole program, we have contributed. Well, look, Dion Brandon took my job, but he replaced me in West Bay as a sports instructor. Mm-hmm. Michael Johnson, he's the woman national coach of Cayman. And I can go on and on. You know, so all of these that have come through.
Progressed. Absolutely. Indeed.
I mean, and that is what is needed here in terms of you just talking about development and pathways and things. I think education and sports should be very two strong things that is together here, especially football.
Absolutely. And I just want to, again, first of all, I thank you for sharing that valuable walk back in time in terms of how you developed and what you did to develop others specifically, and by highlighting that this is the kind of development that needs to happen generationally, year after year, when we look at the future, a.k.a. the next generation of national team players in the camp. This is the kind of level of commitment that is needed, that once existed, but somehow fell off. We need to go back and review it again and implement it if we are serious about taking football to the level that it once attained. You also made a very valuable point in the last segment as well. You encouraged CIFA, the Cayman Football Association, to host a symposium that would bring on board all of the stakeholders in the game of football, the coaches, the players, the advertisers, you name it, come together and engage in a real but specific public consultation of stakeholders on the topic of building a world-class national football team where you can exchange ideas, not from the average fan, but from those who have made a lifetime in this sport and arguably still do it. So I think that's a fantastic recommendation, and I thank you for making it, because it is ideas like the one we are learning from, the ones, plural, that we are learning from you here today that could be obviously amplified in a symposium like that. And certainly we pass on that little bit of encouragement to the Cayman Islands Football Association, who we also hope to have on the program. And we will raise this with them when we do, to gain some feedback. But I believe where you're saying it comes from a good place. And that is what we all want, is to develop a world-class national football program. At 46 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock, we got about 12 minutes. So I want to move swiftly, because if we're not careful, time will run away and we'll be done soon. The second point that Coach Gilly shared with us in his meeting with us last week, Friday, was that leadership is missing in the national team development equation. And I think my colleague quite correctly expanded on that word to even extend it to ownership is needed. And what does he mean by that? Coach Gilly told us that in his opinion, and certainly his experience, the national coach or technical director of the national team, not just today, but arguably going back through the years, has had to wear many caps. You know, not only is he head coach, but, you know, he may very well be team psychiatrist. You know, he's also, you know, the chief fundraiser. So he's out there soliciting advertisers, but he's also doing a lot of administrative work, like planning the fields, planning the locations, you know, planning the transportation, all key areas that fall outside of his key, i.e. purpose of training the 11 or 22 players. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I will definitely. Depends on the portfolio that you carry. If you carry the portfolio of a technical director, what I look at in other jurisdictions, the technical director don't necessarily mean that's the person that trains the national team. That's the man that oversees all of the programs in that location that he's the technical director of. And from the grassroots level straight to the national level.
Right.
And then you have coaches in place for all of these different age groups that he oversees, but they are going towards what? They are working off of what? The program that he has set in place. You understand? With the support of all the fraternities, all the clubs, and everybody is in support of this. That's what the technical director responsibility should be.
Right, but to your point, the technical director and the head coach are in fact two different and separate positions. They shouldn't be held by one person.
Held by one person.
Exactly. Now, when we talked about who should take the lead, this was a rather significant observation. Some persons may view it as controversial, but I believe it to be, if anything, honest. Coach Gilly told us that in terms of who is leading the current national team program, in his opinion, is the wrong person or the wrong body. Right now, he disagrees that CIFA and the job of the Cayman Islands Football Association should be to develop football in the country by all means from the grassroots level, by all means, you know, be responsible for the administrative needs of running the local domestic league. But they should not necessarily be the overarching responsibility of managing a national team, but in fact are leading a national football program, suggesting that where that should belong should be at the political level, the policy level. The Minister of Sport should be claiming ownership for developing a national program in which provides that administrative, hires those key different important components, including the head coach, and of course has the commitment of providing funding to pay for it all in order to develop it at the level it should be. So not CIFA, but arguably government should be the one taking ownership for the sport of football in the Cayman Islands. Do you agree or disagree?
Well, in the past, I think the government was funding the technical director of the Cayman. I know the general secretary of Cayman football right now is Mr. Marcos Tonoco. Well, he was employed by the government. Plus, he's the woman coach that was here, the two Brazilians. They was employed. Now, I don't know where the change went on. That right now, I don't think the government is subsidizing the technical director of Cayman football. I think that all coming through FIFA right now.
But would you agree, though, that
one of the areas that FIFA have in place, you got to be very, very careful in terms of government intervention into any of the national associations, because FIFA have a strict rule there that right now government cannot impose no conditions, and that they can take away their funding, but they cannot tell no national associations how they run their business.
I see. All right.
Okay, that's a big thing in FIFA.
But who champions? And I don't think anything that you've said runs contrary to what we've discussed already, but who champions? Who leads? We talked about, getting our heroes and using those persons, promoting them to inspire the youth, the future. But at the same time, who champions this? Who is the person out there that is inspiring everyone by getting up and saying, this is what we want. We want our team to be on top in 4 years. We want them to be achieving X, Y, and Z, and here's the money. Who champions that? Who do you see doing that? Because this is where my colleague and I believe that should be the Minister of Sports.
Well, it should be the Minister of Sports with the association.
So working in collaboration with FIFA.
In collaboration. You cannot separate those two entities. Not like that. Understand? They are separated in terms of their decision making, but in terms of developing a program that will make a senior national program, both men and women, not just men, both men and women, be more competitive and in our geographical area against more the higher quality teams like Cuba, Jamaica, all those kind of teams like that. I think there need, definitely, it cannot be just the Minister of Sports. It got to be the Minister of Sports and the President of FIFA going to have a strong relationship. Also, they got to make sure that what that relationship and that pathway that want to develop this team maybe 4 years, 5 years time. You hear? Where would you like to be in 4 or 5 years time? You understand? In between. Well, definitely it cannot happen unless there be a collaboration between the government and FIFA.
Right. Again, sorry, just from a technical standpoint, Ellio, is there any way, I think maybe the problem here is the chair position. Can you slide your chair
I think my friend just likes...
I know you like to sit back and chat, relax.
He has a big open space.
I need you to narrow the distance between your mouth and the microphone. Otherwise, we get an echo, if you will.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. Because what you're saying is hugely important, and I want to make sure it's being said clearly and heard clearly on the other end, both on the radio dial and on streaming video. Where was I saying? You asked the question. You don't know where this partnership perhaps went awry, because you highlighted that in this partnership between the government and the organization that we didn't have before, but again, you were a big part of making that happen. You said, we got to get past this to pick up football games. If we want to get serious, we need to organize. And then that was the early start of what became the Cayman Islands Football Association and the organization of the sport. So again, I think we cannot afford to miss that point. But you said you didn't know where this partnership broke down. If I can just perhaps offer up a suggestion, and again, we stated it on Friday, that partnership, in my opinion, broke down regrettably when we had the whole FIFA scandal that impacted, of course, our own Jeff Webb. The government withdrew their financial support. FIFA, as a big body, withdrew their support. And we were left in sort of purgatory in football. And this is where I got to give credit and recognition to people like Alfredo Whitaker, the current president of FIFA. He is trying to rebuild a program from the ashes of what that experience brought us. And whilst, in the early days, one would say, well, really, you got to forgive him because it's not his fault. But we've gone through a number of years since that ugly event, and we need to put it in the rear view and reestablish that partnership, I think, to be successful. But certainly to answer your question, I believe that's where that breakdown started and arguably has gone on for far too long. Would you agree?
Correct. But we cannot continue to use that to justify why we can't move forward now.
Agreed. 100%. Yeah. 100%.
And again, it goes right back to what we spoke about before, about the relationship between government and CIFA. This way the symposium comes in, because all the minister, he should be the man heading up the symposium, along with the president. It should be a collaborated thing there, understand?
Indeed.
Because it can't work. Not only that, football cannot move forward here also unless the private sector get involved. Every other Caribbean country, you look, Flow, Digicel, all of the companies in Bermuda. Bermuda, I preached it for years. Bermuda is similar like Cayman Islands. Tax-free, population size and everything, but the Bermuda have a much more stronger program than the Cayman Islands. And
but you see,
listening can get offended, whatever. Bermuda is very, very strong in terms of their level. But very strong.
But to your point, they have the buy-in from the private sector as well as the government working together in a common direction.
Exactly. All the youth teams and things is sponsored by lawyer firms. Although you can Google it up and see.
And you see, I don't know the specifics there, but I'm going to get back to the point of the persons that the public is voting for and paying to champion this, because I'll bet you if you look into it, you'll probably find that the government has probably put certain incentives in place that motivates businesses, whether it's tax breaks or whatever, for them getting up and doing those sponsorships, just like they would do with scholarships. It has to take a champion in government. This is where we put that collective vote, the collective financing together for government to be able to say, I'm going to offer incentives for those persons who are promoting their players and working unitedly to be able to bring about this new national team.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
I know we got to go to a break.
Well, we do. We got about 23 seconds left. I guess the opportunity is to ask the question now, before we go to the break, and then just hit the answer, because the next segment is our last half hour. The other point, the third, I guess, nugget that came out of Friday's discussion was, and we asked it, we have had a lot of foreign participation in the national program. Some of that foreign participation has been Brazilians, which I was proud of, because they are the best in the world. Take that, deal with it. I don't care how you feel about it. Facts is facts. However, I digress. But we've had Brazilians, just as one example, other nationalities leading our national team, whether they be technical directors or coaching staff. And the question is, can a Caymanian, and I can think of one Caymanian, two, Coach Uda, Coach Gilly, just as examples that I would pick if I was in charge of sports, saying, you guys are the head coach for the national team program. When we come back, we're going to ask that question. We asked it now, but Coach, I want you to ruminate on it and tell us whether or not you think a Caymanian can take the helm and take us to that glorious future. It is 59 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock. We're going to pause, check in again with the BBC News, but our conversation on building a World Cup dream team continues next, right here on Bobo 103.1 FM.
Bobo.
Welcome to our newsroom here in central London. We place ourselves here at a little desk right in the thick of things.
OS from the BBC.
We can catch the very latest news from our colleagues, not just in this enormous room, but also from our colleagues around the world.
I'm in the room where they're treating children.
This is a combat zone.
The situation after the typhoon is very complicated.
It was a very tense situation. OS from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM.
BBC News.
BBC News. World news from the BBC.
Violent clashes.
Thick black smoke.
A tremendous legal victory.
Crucial elections.
Destructive wind.
A search and recovery operation.
A race against time.
An imminent threat. Flying a drone over a rival team's training session.
Whatever is happening, wherever it's happening, catch up with the latest news bulletins from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM.
The BBC's From Our Own correspondent.
In today's Russia, no one is allowed anywhere near the political stage if they pose a serious challenge to Vladimir Putin.
Stories and reflections from our reporters around the world.
There is a major sense of insecurity here. More people are coming in from Sudan every day.
From Our Own correspondent from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM. This is Bobo 103.1, powered by Health Services Authority.
At Health Services Authority, they are committed to caring for you. They are Cayman's largest and longest-standing healthcare provider, offering the most comprehensive range of inpatient, outpatient, and public health services at 9 different locations across all 3 islands.
Across Cayman on 103.1 FM, online, and on your smart speaker. The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo 103.1.
Hello, I'm Tom Dewsbury with the BBC World News. One of the most important figures in pop music, Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys, has died. He was 82. Born in California, Wilson co-founded the Beach Boys in 1961. His songwriting, incorporating complex melodies and intricate harmonies, helped turn the group into a huge commercial success. They sold more than 100 million records, with hits including God Only Knows and Good Vibrations. Speaking to the BBC in 2011, Brian Wilson described his love for his craft.
When I play a piano sing, I go into another world. I go, whoa! And I'm through playing, I come back down to reality, you know. Music takes you on highs. When you hear music, it makes you high, you know. And then when they stop playing the music, you're going, hey, what's going on here? They go, oh, I just listen to some music.
The United States is preparing to move some staff and their families from its embassy in Iraq, as well as from military bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. Officials say the partial evacuation is down to what they describe as heightened security risks in the region. Here's our State Department correspondent, Tom Bateman.
This is a significant measure. I think it has the air of a precautionary measure around it at the moment, and that is because we are at a critical moment in the nuclear talks between the US and the Iranians. Another round of talks due this week, but 2 months since Donald Trump said he would give the Iranians a 2-month deadline, basically. So we're at that deadline, and he said today that he was growing less confident in the process.
The ruling comes after jurors remained deadlocked in 5 days of deliberation. An uneasy calm's descended over Los Angeles as US Marines prepare to deploy to the city after nearly a week of protests and riots over the Trump administration's immigration raids. The first night of a partial curfew was lifted on Wednesday morning. The police said they'd made hundreds of arrests overnight. Carl Nasman is in Los Angeles.
One of the bigger concerns there on the part of the governor and the mayor is that a deployment from those troops could just serve to inflame tensions further, but there is an action playing out in the courts challenging that move by the president. But for now, we actually haven't seen the Marines in the city. They've been doing some training outside of Los Angeles. We had heard at one point they might be coming in later tonight. Now it could be Thursday, so the Marines really not on the scene right now. And of course, what officials here say is that they're simply not needed in the city, that they've got the situation under control.
World News from the BBC. Police in Northern Ireland have asked for other forces in the UK to send reinforcements after 2 nights of violence sparked by the alleged sexual assault of a teenage girl in County Antrim. The unrest began on Monday after 2 14-year-old Romanian boys appeared in court on charges of attempted rape. The worst clashes have been in the town of Ballymena, where more than 30 police officers have been injured by rioters. Austria's president has raised the possibility of tightening gun laws after Tuesday's deadly mass shooting. Alexander Van der Bellen was speaking